Okay, let's begin. We are on page 21B, B4 or B3. But in order to do this, I think we need to go back just a little bit, just to pick up the thread in order to kind of move forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to start again on 21B3. So the Gemara said as follows. The Mishnah mentioned a case that has one act that has multiple things as part of it. And what were those things? That was a person who plows, and we could figure out a way that he could have 8 melachot. And the Mishnah mentioned that he plows on Yom Tov. And the Gemara asked, 1 second, if he plows on Yom Tov, why doesn't he have the extra melacha, not only of plowing, but also of planting? And the Gemara answered, because this opinion is going with the shita of en chiluk melachot b'yom tov. That when it comes to Yom Tov, there's no separation of melachot, and if a person forgot and did multiple melachot in one he'elem, in one forgetting, then there's only one korban. And what was the reason for that? Because it says that a person did achat me'ele, one of these. But that was only said by a case where a person has a korban chatat, which is only for a sin that if you did it on purpose, you had karet. So since on Yom Tov, the sin of melacha is not isur karet, and therefore it does not have a korban chatat. Therefore, we don't have the pasuk is v'asa achat me'ele, which differentiates and says each melacha one, which is called chiluk melachot, which you have on Shabbat. So therefore, we said Yom Tov, and we had chiluk. We do not have chiluk melachot. Et be'Abaya. Abaya asked a question on 21b4. What, is that the case? There's no chiluk melachot on Yom Tov. He brought the case of a person who cooks a gida nasheh in milk on Yom Tov. And the Gemara brought a bunch of things that a person's going to be over on. And what are they in the Braita? The Braita says he gets 5, right? What is the 5 that he gets for cooking and eating this gida nasheh? Loke mishum, he gets because of ochel gida nasheh. Then he gets because mivashel Yom Tov lo shelo b'tzorech, because you cooked for no reason. You're only allowed to cook on Yom Tov if there's a purpose for it. Cooking something that you can't eat is purposeless. So that's 2. The third one is loke mishum mivashel gid b'chalav. You cooked meat and milk. The fourth one is loke mishum ochel basar b'chalav. You ate meat and milk together. You cooking meat and milk together, and you eating milk and meat.
It's an isur to cook it together?
It's an isur to cook, yeah, as well. Veloke, and also mishum blotevashel, and it says it 3 times.
But not chicken. It
says 3 times, but it's not chicken over here. We're talking about gida nasheh, okay, which is the sciatic nerve of an animal. Okay, mishum avara, and also for lighting the fire, because you're only allowed to have havara, even if it's from one to the other, only for the sake of cooking. And over here, because you're not allowed to eat it, that's not considered necessary. V'imita, says the Gemara, and if it's true that you have that you don't have chiluk melachot, mishum havara lo mechayev, you're not going to be chayav for lighting the fire. Why? Because you already got me for cooking on Yom Tov unnecessarily. So if I forgot and I didn't know, that would only be one isur. The Gemara answers. So therefore, we accepted what Abaye says. And it seems that there is chiluk melachot. Answers the Gemara, api kavara, take out the lighting of the fire, if that's the case, on the 5, and include that the animal that you ate gida nasheh for was from an animal that was not slaughtered properly. So the case of the Braita, of you having 5 for 1, buy 1, get 5 free. Where would that be? Get 4 free. That would be when the animal that you had the gida nasheh from was a nevela. The Gemara says, if that's the case, did Rab Chia learn that when the person gets 5 malkut, he gets 2 for eating, when Rab Chia was explaining the Braita, how did he explain it? He divided the 5 into 2 for eating and 3 for the cooking. If you hold that this is the case, that it was nevela, right? Shalosh al achilato hu chayav. You're getting 3 for eating. What are the 3 for eating? Because if you took out havara, you took out the lighting of the fire, and you put it instead, then it's the 5th one is for eating something which is a nevela. So now 3 are in the eating category, and 2 are in the cooking process. Gemara says, so then Rav Chia would not make sense. Ela api kavara. Thank you so much, Baruch Atah Adonai. L'melech haolam shakol yavaro.
Amen.
By the way, that's how you do a revi'it. Okay. Ela api kavara. We take out avara, the kindling, the lighting of the fire, ve'ayil atzeh asherah, and we put it instead that a person is getting benefit from the wood of Asherah tree. What's the Asherah tree? They used to have a process of Avodah Zarah where they would take a tree, and that tree would become an Asherah tree, would become a tree that they would use as Avodah Zarah. And they would come and slaughter animals in front of this, famous tree, etc., etc. Okay? Now, once that tree is Avodah Zarah, right? Once that tree becomes a place, a location of Avodah Zarah, the wood of that tree is now not allowed to be used for personal benefit. So once we institute that that's the case of the Mishnah, so we're adding in another example, a reason why you're deriving benefit from the Asherati. Where do we learn out that a person can't derive benefit? I know you can't bow down to it or sacrifice to it as Avodah Zarah, but how do we know that you're not allowed to use it or get benefit from it? The Pasuk says, V'lo yedabek biyadecha, says the Pasuk, take a look in the side, the full Pasuk, top one in the left-hand most column, V'lo yedabek biyadecha me'uma min acherem, and there should not be stuck in your hand anything from something which was set aside. In order that God should return from his anger. And he will give you mercy and make you merciful. And he will expand you like Hashem has promised your forefathers. So you see that they cannot stick in your hand any benefit from something to do with Avodah Zarah. So therefore...
To make it a shul then?
Sorry?
Would you allow to then have a church to become a shul? Because that's something that was used for Avodah Zarah, you can't use it.
It's an excellent question. The big question of what a person is supposed to do in those cases. In churches, the fact that they turn churches into synagogues, which they have done many times. In fact, the yeshiva of Staten Island, which was under Rav Moshe Feinstein's guidance through his son, is actually in a church. It's like a very religious, very strict yeshiva, right? Staten Island, and he said that in order to turn it into a yeshiva, he said they should leave it unused with all the windows open for an entire year. Fascinating. Okay, is that the halachic obligation? No, but he felt that for a yeshiva it needs to be, so to speak, cleansed. It needs to be it needs to be time that's spent. It needs to be a place that's abandoned, and then you can't just turn it from one to the other. But churches are much less chamur than Avodah Zarah. Why? Because there's a machloket rishonim if Christianity is considered Avodah Zarah or not. What's the machloket? The machloket is shituf Avodah Zarah. Shituf means a partnership. In Christianity, they don't believe that Yeshu is the God. They believe that Yeshu has godly powers. He's the son of God. But God is still in the game. Okay? So they believe in that God, but God then devolved his powers. Now it depends. Every branch of Christianity has a different understanding. But some branches of Christianity are called shituf. So there's some have no shituf, by the way. Some believe that Yeshua has no powers at all whatsoever. So in those branches of Christianity, right, there would be no shituf because there's no partnership. If that's the case, so then that would be similar to a mosque, which is no avodah zarah whatsoever. Not during prayers, we hold that a person's allowed to go into a mosque, right? During prayers, not, because the prayers are a symbol of the religion that sprouted from that belief, and that we don't hold of, right? Okay, so you can't be there for that. Other than that, with Christianity, we hold like the Rishonim that hold that's avodah zarah, okay, but a much lighter form, and there's opinions that hold it's mutar. So churches would be a little bit of a different conversation. Okay, so what do we see now? The guy took wood and he lit the fire, and he's eating from the gidan asher that he cooked in milk, right? So now let me just ask for 1 second. Why does that solve the problem? Remember, the problem was that Reb Chia said that of these 5, 2 were for eating, right? And 2 was for eating, and 3 was for the preparation for the cooking. So now what do? You took out lighting a fire, which is about the bishul, and what did you do? You made it about the atzeh asherah, but that's also in the cooking. So you didn't solve the problem of Reb Chia. The answer is, you did. Why? Because the Isur is not in burning the wood. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to burn the Asherah tree.
You're not supposed to benefit.
Oh, you're supposed to benefit. When do we know that you derive benefit from it? When you ate it. So the Isur of the enjoyment of the tree would be part of Achilah, not of Bishul. Excuse me. Would be on the Bishul, Mechila. No, I got it wrong. Reb Chia says 2 on eating and 3 on Bishul. If we change it to Nivela, it will be 3 on eating and 2 on Bishul. Okay? So here, what are we doing? We're saying that this one is counted in Bishulo. So let's ask the question, the other way. One more time. So Reb Chia says 2 on eating and 3 on cooking. Now we changed it from Nivela, which is an Isur in eating, to the Atzei Asherah. So now that's in Bishulo. My problem with that would be a question. What do you mean? You're supposed to burn it. The answer is, but here the burning is for the sake of your eating. But where would you be obligated to Isurin? At what point? In the Bishul. Because in the process of cooking this thing for the sake of eating, that's why I got it wrong. For the sake of eating, what happens? You're already deriving benefit from the Atzei Asherah. So it would fit 2 for eating and 3 for the process of the Bishul. Okay. The Gemara says, Ravashi, he Rav Acha, the son of Rava, asked Rav Ashi, the same pasuk said, not only you're not allowed to have it, right? You also are not allowed to bring the abomination into your home. So what have you done? You have another Isur of bringing this abomination, the abomination of Avodah Zarah, into your home. So why are you getting 5? You should get 6. The Gemara says, so therefore, it can't be that we're talking about a scenario where the wood that you used was wood from Asherah tree. What are we dealing with? Where the wood was wood that belonged to the Beit HaMikdash, it was sanctified to use as to burn on the Mizbeach as wood for the Mizbeach, and therefore burning of that wood for a civilian purpose, for a non-Hekdesh purpose is Asur. But you don't have the second Isur of bringing it into your house. That's what we get, so you have 5. So where do we know that's Asur? Me'acha. The Pasuk says, you're supposed to burn the Asherah trees. But what I told you to do for Avodah Zarah, Lo ta'asun ken Hashem Elokechem. Don't destroy. The thing I told you to destroy Avodah Zarah, but don't do that to God. Lo ta'asun ken Hashem Elokechem. You should not do that to Hashem your God. Take a look at the pasuk number 3. Okay. V'nitatztem et mizbechotam. Destroy, chop down the mizbechot of Avodah Zarah. V'shibartem et matzevotam, and break the statues and the matzeva. Burn the Avodah Zarah trees. And when you have a psila, a statue of Avodah Zarah, chop it down. And get rid of their names. The next pasuk says, you cannot destroy Hashem your God. So by the way, we learned actually back in the day, you can't destroy a synagogue because of this. Lo ta'asun ken Hashem Elokechem. There's many things that we learn that of destroying or of getting rid of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So when you take this wood, which is designated for Hekdesh, and you burnt it for a civilian use, what do you have? You have Lo ta'asun ken Hashem Elokechem. So the 5th Malkut would be for what? Would be for burning the wood of Hekdesh. I have 2 for eating, and I have 3 for the process of cooking. Gemara continues. Let's go back now to the 8 Malkut that we had for when someone does a plowing on Yom Tov. Siman, Shinbai, Shanaz. What are the Shinbai, Shanbai, Shanaz? Those refer, each one of those letters, Shin, Nun, Bet, Aleph, Yud, refer to Shin, Nun, Zayin, refer to each of the what's it called? The machlokot that we tried to bring on this. Rav, if you look at the bottom, you see he brings them. Rav Hosheya, Rav Hananya, Rav Abau, Rav Abaye, Rav Ashi, Rav Ina, and Rav Zera. So each one represented to one of the sounds that you hear in the different machlokot that people tried to figure out how to classify those eight things. Okay, let's continue. Matkifla Rav Hoshia. Rav Hoshia asked the question. So who's the first of the Shinbai? Rav Hoshia. Rav Hoshia says, V'licha shivnami hazorea benachal etan. Let's find another one to give you malkut on. What is the, where would that be? When a person would plant in Nachal Etan. The Asharte, where do we find the Isur of planting in Nachal Etan? The Pasuk says, Asher lo ya'aved bo velo yizarea. So let's look at those Pesukim on the side. The Pasuk says, we're up to, hey, ve'oridu ziknei ha'irahu et ha'egla el Nachal Etan. The people would bring the egla, what's it called? The egla arufa. They would bring it to the Nachal Etan, the solid valley. Asher lo ya'aved bo velo yizarea. That you can't work over there. It can't be plowed, and it can't be. You can't bring what's it called? You can't plant there. So this place of the Egla Arufa, the Torah tells you that you can't have planting or threshing in that place. So if that's the case, let's use a case of Nachal Etan where he planted in such a place, right? And then we'll be able to include a ninth malkut in the scenario of plowing, of person doing one plowing and fulfilling all these things. The Gemara says another question that they brought, Matkifla Rav Chananya brought, he's the second of the Shinbai, V'lichshuv nami, hamochek et Hashem, behalichato, when a person would erase the name of Hashem with the plowing as he's going. Where do we find this? Right? Destroy the name of Avodah Zarah. You shouldn't do that to Hashem, your God. So what's the example? Let's say a person has a scroll on the ground, and the threshing goes right through the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it tears the name of Hashem into two pieces. So imagine the name of Hashem written on a parchment, and the person plows through that thing. I was thinking also, it could be like they used to have in these horror movies. There's something in the cornfield. There was a shape or a name. Imagine the guy wrote into the ground the name of Hashem across the plow, and he plows right through it and destroys and cuts the name of Hashem into two. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have an object. Maybe there'll be another way of doing this. Interesting question. Chalovadia asks, let's say I have a cassette tape, and someone says the name of Hashem on the cassette tape. Are you allowed to record over that cassette recording? Chalovadia discusses this case. What happens if a person has notes on their computer? Yud Ke Vav Ke, are they allowed to delete the document? So all these questions are interesting things of understanding what is the Roshem of God's name. Okay? What is the imprint of God's name? Is that an imprint? Is there something actual there? So there are many cases like that. I was thinking to myself, I don't know if you remember, they used to have these planes that they would do skywriting. Imagine you write in smoke Hashem's name. So by definition, it's going to disappear. So, but I'm saying, this is an example of understanding that it would depend. Someone needs to go on silent. You have to understand, what is a Roshem? What is God's name being written or being somewhere where then you could ask, did you erase it? Or was it something that by its own definition was already never going to be in the category of written? Because it was, as you said, it was always going to disappear.
We need a class of halachot after all these classes. Because there's so many questions from these questions.
There are questions from these questions, yes. By the way, as an example, I want to bring you an idea. The Sefarim like the Rosh, if you open up a Gemara and turn to the back, Sefarim like the Rosh, like the Mordechai, all these Sefarim, the Rif, what did they do? They only wrote about the parts of the Gemara which were halacha oriented. So let's say the Gemara went on a whole thing, but it wasn't relevant to the halacha, so the Rosh would not talk about that. He would skip that part of the Gemara. He was dedicated only to the halachot that came out of the Gemara. So students of halakha that are trying only to learn the halakha and not necessarily the other lessons the Gemara is trying to teach you, which might be hashkafa, might be musar, might be the way to live your life. So those opinions, those sifarim were written exactly in that way. Those were the class after the class. Okay, let's continue. So The Gemara says, what would happen if you talked about that case? That would be another way of finding malkut. In this case, for a person doing one action of threshing, of bringing a plowing, and doing one action being many different things. The Gemara continues, Matkif la Rababau. Rababau asks a question. V'lichshiv nami hakotzetz et baharato, where someone cuts off a baheret spot. So as he's plowing, he puts his hand where he has a tzarat on his hand, a little thing, and the plow shears it off, cuts off. You're not allowed to cut off a baheret, a piece of tzarat. Where does we know that that's asur? The pasuk says, "Hishameh b'nega tzarat," that you should be careful with the nega tzarat. Take a look at the pasuk on the side, number of vav. Hishameh b'nega tzarat lishmor meod v'lasot kol asher yiru otchem. What does it mean to be careful with protecting? Right? Like Shmirat Shabbat means to keep Shabbat, to protect Shabbat. So how do you shomer your tzarat? You make sure not to cut it off, so the Kohen could have an opportunity to look at it and decipher what it actually is. Hishameh b'nega tzarat. Says the Gemara. That was the next question. Matkif la Abaya. Abaya asked a question. V'lichshiv nami. Let's also count hameziach achoshem me'al ha'efod, where the person moves off the choshen from the ephod. So we know the choshen is the breastplate. It was on the ephod, the part of clothing that was underneath it from the Kohen Gadol. The pasuk says that can't come apart from it. Like the pasuk says, and also v'hamesir badei Aaron, if someone were in the act of plowing to remove the badei Aaron, the poles of the Aaron are not ever allowed to be removed from the rings of the Aaron. So if someone were to remove one from the other, from the breastplate from the ephod, or the badei Aaron from the Aaron, where do we find the asara? We learn it from here. V'lo yasuru, you can't remove the poles. Or v'lo yizach hachoshen, the breastplate should not be removed from one of the others. Hold on one second. Let's take a look for 1 second at... hold on a second. Where did I find this? I thought I remember seeing this shita. Hold on. I can't tell you where I saw it. Anyway, I saw a question that asks, where would be the scenario? I can't remember what I said. Anyway, where would be the scenario where the person would remove the breastplate from the Aaron, or remove the poles from the Aaron, from the breastplate from the ephod, or remove the poles from the Aaron in the process of plowing? The other things we talked about, it's in the movement. Where was the Kohen Gadol lying on the ground? What is the case exactly that would be relevant? So, I remember someone, I can't remember where I saw it, where he asked this as a question. And I think the answer would be that it doesn't necessarily mean that the plow itself needs to be chopping it in half. With a plow, it could also be that the act of plowing would remove it. So let's say, as an example, the badei ha'aron were in a certain place, and in the process of plowing, whether the straps would get caught up in the badei ha'aron, or something would happen that would cause it. Now, Abaya is just asking it as another thing that could have happened in the scenario, but it's getting more and more outlandish, isn't it?
Yeah, how could they even be plowing in the vicinity of the Aron? Or
well, the Aron, remember, in our post Bet Hamikdash world, the Aron always sits only in the Kodesh Kodashim, but in the pre Bet Hamikdash world, the Aron went everywhere with them.
But it's still sitting in a field exposed to, it's not enclosed in the Mishkan?
Yeah, like as an example, the whole story with Uzzah, Peretz Uzzah, is where they were bringing it back from the Pilishtim, and it was on a wagon.
That's
Where he grabbed it, right? So you see the Aron is moving. And then when the Aron then was placed in the threshing, the irony is, where did they store the Aron? Anyone remember? This is fascinating.
Where they store the Aron?
Where did they store the Aron after the story of Peretz Uzzah?
They hid it somewhere.
underground.
Where?
Underground.
Not underground. This is on the way up to the Bet HaMikdash, when they got it back from the Pilishtim. Where did they store it? They stored it in a place, and what was the name of that place where it was stored? It was a threshing floor. So understanding that the Aron's permanent spot at that point was in a place where they were dealing with crops and whatever. So it's not as outlandish, but still they're asking question after question of other things that could have come up in the situation. We could have thrown them in to find another Isur that one could do in one action that could wind up doing this. And I was just thinking to myself, how much fun was this day in the Bet Midrash that day? They're like, guys, could you think of anything? What other item in the Torah could you imagine that the guy might have done? Right, and still been over. Okay, either way. Rashi asks, let's say the guy, he's being choresh using Asherah wood. So as an example, he took the wood, he turned it or fashioned it into a plow. Okay? Now he's using wood from Avodah Zarah for his personal benefit. How do we know? Where's the isur from that? We already said it. Right? Now, again, remember, we already saw a situation where the person had wood of hekdesh. So we could have said also where he used wood of hekdesh to be a plow. Right?
So this wood has to be burnt, but that's the only way to dispose of it?
No, you could do anything that you want to do to dispose of it. Let's say, as an example, you found some sort of a bleach, that would eat away at the wood and render it, just kind of eliminate it. It would probably also be mutar.
But you can make
the pasuk says this Rafun Ba'esh. I don't think that it's dafka. I don't think it's dafka. I'll double check and find out for sure. But you definitely can't use it. So we could have technically said wood of hekdesh. I was thinking to myself, what if we did wood of hekdesh that was then turned into an etz asherah? So I don't know.
Does it go back to the original?
I don't know if it would lose. Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. That's a question for an expert in Kodashim. Okay, Matkif la Ravina. Ravina asks, 1 second. We also have hakotetzi lano tovot. Someone cuts down good trees. What are considered good trees? Trees that are able to produce something. So we know the halakha is that when you're besieging a city, like the pasuk says, the pasuk says that when you're laying siege to a city, and you want to cut down the trees around to be able to either make the siege more effective or to be able to have a flat land for your troops to be able to lay siege to that area in the process of war, the pasuk says you shall not cut down its fruit trees. Rather, you should eat from them. Why? That's the isur of bal tashchit, of wasting something. So even today, by the way, if you have a backyard and there's a fruit tree in the backyard and you want to get rid of it to make a pool, you're not allowed to cut it down. Not allowed. Isur deoraita. So what do people do? Right smack in the middle, what do? They have a company that comes and they pick it up with all of its earth and they relocate it somewhere else and it continues to grow as is. Fascinating. So you have a company whose primary purpose could be to fulfill a mitzvah from the Torah. Okay. So what if the person chops down ilanot tovot and he uses the wood for for the plow? That's what one would have imagined. Only thing I'm wondering is like this. That's not really a fair one. Why? Because the isur is to chop it down.
Correct.
Who said that once I've chopped it down, it's forbidden for use? It's asur b'hana'ah. It's not. So the Gemara must not mean in this challenge that he used it as the plow. It must mean that he took the plow and he severed the roots of the tree. Because there's no isur hana'ah. But we know you're not allowed to chop it down. So the scenario would be where plowing would uproot a tree. Now, I thought to myself, come on, what kind of plowing is going to uproot a tree? And then I remembered, in front of my house, I have the tiniest producing lime tree. It's this skinny, yeah. I bought it in a nursery, right? I used it on Shabuot to bring fruit trees to my house because of the minhag, right? But it's this thing is this thick. That's how big the tree is. But it produces limes. Obviously, how big are the roots at that stage? Minuscule. If someone came with a proper plow and being pulled by, as the Mishnah says, a bull and a donkey, right? They would absolutely cut right through those roots, rip it out. So the case over here would not be where you're using the wood, like the case of the Asherah. The case over here would have to be where the plow uproots it. Okay. Finally, what's the last question? Amalei Reb Zira le Reb Mani. Reb Zira said to Reb Mani, let's also consider, Kegon de'amar shivu'ah shelo echrosh b'yom tov. The guy said, I swear I won't plow on Yom Tov. Now, the act of plowing is therefore doing what?
He's breaking an oath.
Is breaking his oath. So we found another one. So that's another malkut. Answers Rav Mani. Rav Mani said to Rav Zera, Hatam lo kachal shivu'ah. There the shivu'ah won't work. Why? Mushba ve'omed b'har Sinaihu. The person is already mushba ve'omed. Since working on Yom Tov is already an isur, so when I swear that I'm not going to do something that I'm already not allowed to do, the shivu'ah doesn't land. Why? Because I'm already mushba on that. So the shivu'ah doesn't add anything.
It's not viable.
It's not a viable thing that you could then get malkut for. So you would not get it. It's still asur, by the way. You just won't get extra malkut for it.
So it's not a worthless oath.
Sorry?
In this case, it's not a worthless oath.
It is a worthless oath, but it's still asur, is my point. You're not allowed to make that shivu'ah. But even though you're not allowed to make that shivu'ah, the shivu'ah would not obligate you for malkut because it's already something that you're forbidden. So the shivu'ah didn't create something new. Amalei Reb Zera said, okay, no problem. Let me just dial it a little bit to the right. Kegon de'amar shivu'ah shelo echosh ben b'chol ben yom tov. If the guy swears, I won't plow on chol or on yom tov, since the migu dechala alei shivu'ah b'chol, once I made the shivu'ah that I won't plow during the weekday. So right. Once the shivu'ah has a place to land, it also lands chala alea nami b'yom tov. It will also land on Yom Tov, and therefore doing the isur on Yom Tov would also create malkut. The Gemara says midi deite b'she'ela lo katani. Now, the idea that you have an opportunity to undo it, that means that it's not an absolute isur. So the Mishnah was not talking about things that if you did hatarat nedarim, you could get out of. So therefore, that's maybe a reason why we didn't add that one. So all these questions are primarily asking one thing. What's the one thing that we're asking? Why didn't you said 8, here's another, here's another, here's another, here's another. So Reb Zera said to him, Rav Mani said to him, Reb Zera, you know why we didn't include yours? Because it wasn't an absolute. It was something that if you did, hatarat nedarim, you could get out of. The Gemara says, Velo. Is that the case? That we didn't put in things that you could have asked the question on? Hekdesh is a scenario that you could have gotten rid of. Why? Because we said that if your person was mekadesh, the ox and the donkey, and therefore you can't use them for your personal use, you're able to do that. Why? Since Hekdesh, what could you have done? You could have gotten rid of it either by undoing it with by like a hatara, same type of a concept, right? Or by transferring the hekdesh to something else. Gemara says b'bechor. So what are we talking about? Which case are we talking about where you could not use? It's not a hekdesh where you said I'm consecrating the value of this and you could then supplant it to something else, transfer it to kedusha. It's talking about a bechor. The bechor you can't use because it's already hekdesh in and of itself, and you can't get rid of the hekdesh of bechor, the kodesh of bechor, and that's the case that the Mishnah is talking about. The Gemara says v'harei nazir. The nazir, you could also get rid of the status of nazirut through the process of annulment, like we said earlier. Gemara says no, but it's a Nizirut Shimshon. It's a type of Nizirut, the Nizirut of Shimshon, that you can't undo. Nazir Shimshon, Bar Itamuye Lemetimu, is a Nazir Shimshon. Does he have the problem of Isur Nevelot? It's not true. Since, right, a Nazir Shimshon has separate halachot where he's not obligated on the case of metim, of impurity. And the Mishnah counts the one of the Isurim as going into becoming tameh in the place of Nazirut, in the place of plowing. So if you change it to the Nazirut Shimshon so that it wouldn't be something that could be annulled, then it would not be obligated for that the second Isur. The Gemara says, Ela, Hai Tana, Isur Kolel Letle. The Tana over here is saying certain things that are Isur Kolel, that if you have something which is another Isur on top of the Isur that was already there from before, the Tana is not including Isur Kolel. Isurim that are included already in it, something else, an inclusive Isur. So therefore, if that's the case, since the plowing was already forbidden because it was Yom Tov, so therefore you can't include another shibuah on top of it. And therefore, since he does not hold of Yisur Kolel, that's why we wanted to go that way. Now the Gemara says, you know what, should we end here? I'm just trying to think. You know what? We have another 2 seconds. The Mishnah says as follows. We got one of the prohibitions that we brought. What was the idea? We talked about when you have two different types of animals. So the Gemara says as follows. When you have Isur Kilayim, not only in that case, Rav Hoshia says, Hamarbia Shor Pesule Mukdashim, one who takes a Shor Mukdashim and something that was Kadosh, that became disqualified, let's say as an example, for a mum, right? And you redeemed it with another animal, lokesh yinayim. The person gets an extra act of, of malkut, okay? So in the scenario, when we have a shor psulei mukdashim, so there would be an extra malkut penalty even for the same type of an animal. Okay, let's look at Rashi one second, and this will end. Rashi says, "Shinifda," that you already were podeh, so you transfer the kedusha to another animal. Afil al mino, even on another one of the same type of an animal. Loke share guf echad, it's one guf. Ve'asao hakatuv shne gufin. The Torah considered it two different things. The Torah tchulim v'Torah kodashim yesh alav. Torah tchulim shemutar ba'achila mechutz lepetach oel moed kilu lo ukdash me'olam. So the Torah tells us that the case of shor psulei mukdashim would have an extra set of lashes for it, even within the same species. You would not need to split the species. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak added, "Hamanhig b'shor psulei mukdashim." So if someone is leading their, for plowing, for a wagon, doesn't make a difference. Someone who's using shor mukdashim, lokeh, he gets malkut. Why? Share guf echadhu, because this ox that you're using is one body, it's one item. The animal itself, even though there's only one animal here, the Torah calls it two different animals. So that would be considered kilayim because of its mixed status. If you take a jacket and it has leather, there's other thing they call it mixed media. That's what they call it in the world of textiles, right? They would use two different items. That item is called mixed media. You have one jacket, but it's made out of two things. This one animal has two different statuses, so to be able to use it together would also be the isur of kilayim. A person would get malkut for using these two things together because it's a quasi-state. Where else do we have this idea? You have a similar concept with a person who is a servant of a Jewish person. The halakha is, if they're set free, Eved Kenani, they become the document that sets them free actually also makes them into a Jewish person. Did you know that? So as an example, the Gemara Berachot talks about Rabban Gamliel. That Rabban Gamliel had 9 people for a minyan. Anyway, they couldn't find the 10th. He took his Eved Tevi, he wrote him a get shichrur. Immediately he became Jewish. And what happened? He was able to be mitzaref for the minyan. Okay, so an Eved Kenani has half chiyuvim mitzvot. He's obligated in all mitzvot like the same mitzvot that a woman is obligated, even a man. A male Eved Kenani. The minute they're giving get shechrur, what happens? They become 100% a Jewish person. So what happens if an Eved Kenani is owned by 2 partners? One of them says, "I'm giving in my share." He writes some Eved here. So now the guy is what's called Chetziav Eved, Chetziav Ben Chorin. The Gemara says that the Eved then goes to the other partner and says, "I can't be in this limbo." Why? Because half of me is obligated to mitzvot. The other half is not. Half of me is allowed to marry these people and not those people. The other half of me is allowed to marry those people but not those people. I can't be in this status. So he can force the other person to make it, to redeem him in that scenario. So there are people, there's things in halakha that have a simultaneous dual status. So that's the case of shor psulei mukdashim.